Welcome. My name's Kevin, and this is the Bible verse discussion of the Bible Artist podcast. So in the Bible verse, we are discussing how we would adapt the story of David's time in the wilderness, leading a band of outlaws as they're on the run from King Saul, who is trying to destroy David. And we're talking about how we would turn that into a multi-season TV show. Which focuses primarily not on David himself as the hero, but on some of the men that follow David and who are changed as a result of knowing him. So it's a little bit like the approach of The Chosen, of kind of centering on the disciples who are following Jesus. We're trying to do kind of that same sort of approach with the story of David. So last week, we actually went through our outline, like a full-length outline for episode 1 of our show. I also did kind of a shorter outline for episode 2 that kind of gave you a overview of the events that are happening in it. I can do like a real short kind of encapsulation of those events, and maybe also just review some of the characters for those of you who are new to the show, or who it's been a couple weeks since we did that. But before I get into all of that, let me have Chad and Victor introduce themselves. Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chad. Back by popular demand, or by demand of Kevin, basically. No, I missed this last time, so if you missed the last one, I'll be playing catch up with you here. So, but yeah, happy to be here. I guess in short, longtime friend of Kevin. We do creative things together, and I am a chaplain also.
I'm Victor. I am not a chaplain, but I am a longtime video producer and writer. I enjoy faith-adjacent creative things like this, and it's interesting. It's fascinating to go through these. I have a novel that I'm working on that I'm actually serializing online called The Sojourners. I'm putting out a chapter a week. Chapter 4 is going up this weekend, and you can find that at vicdigital.substack.com, and the link hopefully will be in the notes below too. It's a Christian fantasy book. I call it Reverse Narnia. Imagine 4 kids from another world come to our world, learn about Christ, and then bring that information back to their world. How would that change a world like Westeros or Middle Earth when you have a bunch of people going to evangelize it? So that's kind of a nutshell what it's about.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first bits of Victor's novel, so I really hope that you check that out if you haven't had a chance to. And it's free.
It's free. Yep.
Free novel for you to enjoy. Okay. So if you are new to our show, right now what I've got up is kind of an outline of our first season, which begins so David goes to the city of the priests at Nob. He's on the run from King Saul, and he gets some help there, but Saul does a big massacre, and that kind of is one of the inciting incidents of our story. So it starts with that event at Nob. I'll talk a little bit more about episode 1, and the midpoint of our season we're going to get to today. It's a famous story where Saul goes into this cave to literally to take a dump, and David catches him while he's in there, and he has the opportunity to kill him or to let him go free. And so we'll talk about what happens in that story later on today. And then kind of the finale of our season is going to be in episode 10, when we get kind of a similar story where once again David has Saul at his mercy. Once again he spares Saul's life, but to kind of to bring kind of a conclusion to our story, we're going to show how things change between those two events, and how after the first event, David kind of responds by just trusting God to continue to protect him from Saul. But after that final event, David's men are going to really push him to find safety in the land of the Philistines. And that's actually going to connect back into today's episode as well. So we'll be setting up for that finale even in episode 3 of our season. But let me go through some of the characters that are in our show just in case you aren't familiar with some of the stuff that we've been doing so far. So, like I said, our main character for our show is not David. David is a character who is present in our show. He is a bit like Jonathan Rumi's Jesus in The Chosen. He's present very often in the show, but we are kind of seeing him and his actions through the perspective of other characters. And so some of those characters include a slave character who I finally came up with a name for instead of just calling him the slave all the time. So his official name is Jehoiada. And then there is Abiathar, who is, he's in the book of Samuel. And, oh, wait, actually, back to Jehoiada quickly. So Jehoiada, his backstory, I should give more detail before I jump to the next person. So he, in our story, Jehoiada is, he starts out as a debt slave. So someone who has fallen behind on his debts and has been forced into indentured servitude to a wealthy landowner who happens to be Nabal, someone who's going to come into our story later on. And part of his backstory is that he served in the armies of Saul in earlier wars against the Philistines, but as a result of his service, one of his hands got maimed, and he's not able to carry out his duties in farming as efficiently or effectively as he normally would, and that's how he comes to fall into heavier and heavier debt, and he becomes indebted to Doeg the Edomite, who is a servant of Saul, and that's how. So he gets dragged away from his farm. His son gets sold off, or actually, his son gets taken into service in Saul's household. Jehoiada, because he's maimed, Doeg doesn't think he'll be very valuable, and so he just sells him off to Nabal, and that all kind of happens in flashback in episode 1 of our story. Jehoiada is, he's wanting to get back to his son. He's wanting to be free from slavery, and our story is going to kind of follow how his joining the David and the Outlaws kind of dovetails, but also sometimes creates tension with those goals that he has. Our other main character among the Outlaws is Abiathar. So Abiathar is in the book of Samuel. So the book of Samuel describes this important event where, like I said earlier, David, he's fleeing from Saul, and he goes to the city of the priests. The priests don't know that Saul is after David. They think that David is still a servant in good standing with Saul. And so they help him out. They give him the showbread. This is a story that actually Jesus alludes to in the Gospels at one point. But anyway, they give David and his men some food. David also requests the sword of Goliath, this like massive sword that is apparently kind of being kept as a trophy among the priests. And he also inquires of God through the priests. So the priests kind of do all of that, not really knowing that there's any kind of political valence to what they're doing. But Saul hears about it, and he ends up like slaughtering the entire city of the priests, all the priests, all their women, all their children. And we're told that the only one who escapes is the son of the high priest, and this guy's name is Abiathar. So he will eventually become the new high priest. He flees with the ephod, with the Urim and Thummim, which are important because they're tools that the Israelites were given to inquire from God, to seek God's guidance. And so Abiathar flees. He ends up finding his way to David, and he's grieving, and he's got a sense of vengeance and grievance as a result of the horrible things that Saul has done. And so part of his story is going to be wanting revenge against Saul for what he's done, wanting a sense of security also, and wanting to kind of push David to take matters into his own hands, whereas David is wanting to respect Saul as the anointed of God, even though he's done horrible things. And then we also have a couple of main characters who are kind of among, sorry about that, who are among kind of the court of Saul. So we've got a young servant boy who happens to be the son of Jehoiada. So after his son is taken, he's brought into the court of Saul. His name is Benaiah, and he becomes a helper for Jonathan, Saul's son. And so in episode 1, Benaiah, he happens to witness Jonathan and David kind of having this final parting moment before David flees from Saul. And so he kind of is struggling to know, like, within Saul is like wanting to catch David, and so he's threatening his servants and telling them that if any of them know any information about what happened to David, they have to tell him immediately, otherwise they're going to get beaten or even potentially killed. And so Benaiah is kind of struggling to know, like, whether he should report what he saw or remain loyal to Jonathan. And at the end of episode 1, he decides to remain loyal to Jonathan, even though Saul ends up finding out the information anyway from another source. And then we also have the Hittite among the people of Saul. So the Hittite will eventually be revealed to be Uriah the Hittite, who's famous for later on in the book of Samuel when David eventually has him executed to kind of cover up David's transgressions, his adultery with Uriah's future wife, Bathsheba. So that's kind of way down the line for, we're not going to depict those events, but they kind of create a sense of destiny for this character and just are really going to kind of freight our emotional connection to him. But in our story, this Hittite character, he starts out as kind of a mercenary who is working for Saul. He's very gifted as a tracker, so he's able to try to pursue after David when David goes on the run. He's sent to find him. And eventually, when Abiathar flees from Nob, the Hittite is... So the Hittite refuses to participate in the destruction of Nob itself because he's got kind of this inner code, even though he is mostly just kind of driven by himself and his own goals. He does have kind of his own ethics, and he refuses to participate in a wholesale slaughter of the town. But he is willing to go kind of act as almost like a bounty hunter to try to catch Abiathar. And so that's kind of, I guess in terms of the structure of episode 1, kind of the final act of it is the Hittite pursuing after Abiathar, and then also Jehoiada, who kind of meets up with Abiathar is fleeing from Nob. And eventually Abiathar and Jehoiada, they're saved by David and his men, who kind of appear out of the wilderness and hold the Hittite and his men at sword point and send them off and tell them, we don't want any fighting. We're not trying to kill Saul. And the Hittite, he realizes from that moment that David is actually a more kind of noble character than Saul is himself. And so that's going to kind of set him on the trajectory of eventually separating himself more and more from Saul's camp. And eventually, by the end of the season, he'll be joining David's side, and eventually become Uriah the Hittite. I've been talking for a lot. Chad and Victor, slow me down, ask questions, clarify things that I didn't get to, and describing kind of these characters and that first episode.
Well, I think just the fact that the Hittite is not an Israelite, it's important. Because it's like that's something I never really thought about until we started talking about it. For this, is that he is not one of them; he is an outsider. So it becomes somebody important. So I think that's going to be an interesting arc for him to not just become a confidant of David, but become an Israelite himself in a way.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if I think I mentioned this in our last session, so Chad might not have been there for it. Chad, Uriah, I believe the etymology of it is like Yahweh is my fire or my light, something like that. Like Yah and the Uri, which would imply like an Israelite background. And so what I'm thinking we'll do with the Hittite is actually have him have a different first name starting out. So
we talked about that at least, I think.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You were there for
Kind
that.
of, yeah.
Yeah. So like in First Samuel, in the episode 10 story, we're told that we're actually another Hittite is mentioned, Ahimelech the Hittite, and so that'll be our Hittite, but he'll eventually get renamed Uriah as he kind of shifts his allegiance to Yahweh.
Nice. Yeah.
Chad, do you have any?
Talk about that one? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from episode 1, or just kind of refreshing details on any of the characters? Good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me do a quick rundown of episode 2 as well. I won't go as in depth for this one, I don't think. But basically, the episode it focuses on first off, it starts with Jehoiada and Abiathar kind of being brought in to David's outlaw band and kind of meeting them. And then Jehoiada is pretty quickly brought along by Abishai and Asahel, who are two of David's men, his nephews actually, who are going to Bethlehem to check on things, because Bethlehem is one of the few cities that is kind of supporting David as Saul is going after him and his men. And Saul has the wisdom to realize that you should probably go check in on Bethlehem, that they'll obviously be trying to support David. And so he sends the Hittite to go get Jesse and bring him in. Jesse is David's father. And so when Jehoiada and Abishai and Asahel get to Bethlehem, the Hittites gotten there first, and he's taking Jesse away. And so there's a bit of a tug of war where they're trying to get David's father, Jesse, to safety. And eventually, also kind of in the kind of B story, Abiathar is kind of struggling he's struggling with grief over the events that happened in episode 1, having lost everyone. So he's mad, he's grieving. He even maybe blames David a little bit because, David, he didn't give them any sort of warning about Saul being after him. But he's also kind of just trying to figure out what's next for him, what purpose he could possibly have at this point in his life. And so along the way, he actually ends up using the ephod to help them find Jesse, and then the episode ends with them bringing Jesse to safety in Moab. But the king of Moab won't permit their entire band of 400 men to go stay in his city. And so the episode ends with them having to kind of set out and find another place to go, which is setting up for episode 3, which is what we'll cover today. Chad, it looks like you had a question.
I was thinking of Abiathar. So as far as his kind of emotional journey, and then even thinking his larger goals, is he going to have that kind of larger issue of his zeal being so strong that he's kind of zeal for the Lord and for holiness is going to drive him to vengeance? Is that still kind of the idea with him?
Yeah, I think so.
And so, excuse me, I can't remember exactly the details of that story, but is it what he does for David and allowing him to eat the bread and take the sword? Is there a case to be made that he shouldn't have done that and wasn't being like zealous enough for the holy things.
So the high priest who allows David to do those things is actually Abiathar's father.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And so actually in episode 1, I kind of skimmed over this in the summary. There's a little bit of back and forth between Abiathar and his father, where Abiathar, he senses that things are off, and he's kind of hesitant about them kind of getting involved in, like, there's just some things that seem strange to him. And so he counsels his father to not help David, but his father kind of pushes through and insists on doing it. And then after that happens, they end up discovering through the ephod that they've made a mistake, and that, or at least that Saul is going to be coming to get them. And so his father sends him off to seek safety while he faces Saul.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. Any other questions either about Abiathar or episode 2?
We'll circle back if we have any.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, there shouldn't be too much that's. We've got like a little bit of connective tissue between episodes, but it's also a little bit episodic. So, cool. Well, let's get into episode 3. So far, all the episodes have been very like focused on a place, and so kind of as shorthand, I'm just calling them according to kind of the main location of each episode. I'm not sure if like in a final version, if I would want to go for something more clever for the title or not. But so this episode is focused on Gath. So the cold open, like the kind of opening scene, is going to be we'll just see the Philistines of Gath coming in, raiding the city of Keilah, which is a Israelite city that we're told that the Philistines were attacking it and taking, I think it's their grain or something like that. And that'll come in more towards the end of the episode and in the following episode as well. But we're just kind of setting up, reminding people that the Philistines are regularly attacking Israelite cities. And then from there, Act 1, we'll see David and his outlaws near Gath. So David kind of instructs them to wait for him, and then kind of hiding his identity, David goes and turns himself in to some of the Philistine, like a Philistine patrol or guards that are nearby, and offers to serve Gath without kind of identifying who he actually is. He just claims that he's like a disaffected Israelite that wants to serve the Philistines. So as that's happening, the Hittite, he has tracked David and his men north, and so he happens to see David going with the Philistines into Gath, and he decides that they're not going to be able to attack the Philistines to try to get David, so he decides to head back to report to Saul what he's seen. And meanwhile, among the outlaws, as they see David taken into Gath, they kind of are debating what they should do, and the men aren't kind of easy. They don't feel comfortable just letting David go into the city by himself with no one as backup, and so they decide to send in some some non-warriors as spies. So they want people who the Philistines won't be like suspicious of looking at them, and so because they want people who don't look like they're potentially like Israelite warriors that are trying to get in to infiltrate the city, they end up choosing Abiathar, who as a priest doesn't have kind of like the hands and the body of a warrior. And then they also choose Jehoiada, who, because he's maimed, doesn't seem like a warrior type to kind of go and be backup for David. So let me pause there. That would be kind of the end of Act 1. It's kind of setting up some of the conflicts for the episode. Do you guys have any questions or things that we could clarify about what's going on?
It's just like I think of that it's like a type of episode almost, or you can play off of it a little bit and have a little bit of fun. I think with it's like a trope, right? Like you can have an episode in a TV show. I'm trying to think. Where characters they go in disguise into some other setting, and things don't go well.
Yeah.
Or
like
they have to. Part of the
infiltration.
humor is like needing to, like they kind of are trying to figure out how to play these other people and be convincing, but they're not terribly smooth. So, if you feel like that's appropriate, you could throw in a little bit of that humor. But that's what it made me think of right off the bat. Was like, oh, this is like a kind of episode that's familiar in other types of shows. So maybe there isn't going to be humor. What do you think, Kevin or Vic?
No, I didn't think. For one thing, I didn't kind of go into like the detail of like thinking through like exact lines and stuff like that. So a lot of the humor would probably come out in a more like moment by moment basis. But I think that's a good point. Like I feel like this would be like a good episode for there to be some laughs. While also, there's also like, drama and tension and stuff. Obviously,
I'm just thinking like Abiathar will be a pagan priest, and it's kind of like he has to like try and find, like it's not natural for him to be like I guess like what would the word be pagan, I guess, or just irreverent or sacrilegious or whatever. And so he's kind of like he's bad at being a pagan priest. So
every time he has to say Baal or whatever, he grimaces instead of looks happy about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot of potential humor in that. Like, I was more thinking of that as like a setup for kind of drama, but there's a lot of humor in that that would be fun to mine out of it. It's good.
Well, I got a couple questions. Okay, so how are we going to present what David's plan is going in to do this? Like, what's his deal? What's he think he's going to get out of sneaking in and offering to do this? I mean, he's putting himself in a lot of danger for what?
In theory, like he is looking for what he'll eventually get in reality next season. So he's looking to basically see if he can get the Philistines to allow him and his men to serve and kind of have their own little enclave and protection from Saul. But he's initially kind of disguising his true identity because he figures like if he can kind of establish some sort of a deal and then kind of like slowly roll out more information about himself, that makes more sense than just like coming with like the details about himself that the Philistines are going to be mad about.
So how do we present that's what his plan is to the audience?
So I think that would come out.
Who's he explaining that to?
Yeah. So towards the beginning of Act 1, before David hands himself over to the Philistines, he'll give a brief explanation to his men of like kind of what his plan is. But they'll be hesitant about it, like because it's still a bit of a crazy plan. So they'll be even though he has a plan, they aren't going to really be willing to trust it. And as it turns out, it actually wasn't a good plan. So it's good that they were.
And another question is like, so at what point do we shift over into now we're following the Hittite and his point of view? How much of it is we just seeing it through his eyes?
Yeah. So this episode I did start to plot out with a little bit more detail. So we would kind of would shift perspective a couple of times. So would start out with David and his men, see him explain the plan, see him kind of get handed over, but then would cut scene to the Hittite watching those things, like watching David getting taken into the city from afar, him talking to his men, deciding to go back, and then we'd cut back to the outlaws as they're kind of waiting for David. They're getting worried, and they decide to send in Abiathar and Jehoiada. That's basically kind of the flow I was thinking.
Okay.
And then from there, we'll move into Act 2. So this will be, them starting to carry out their plans. So, yeah, like Chad was saying, Abiathar is going to be disguised as a pagan priest, which he's not going to be happy about at all, especially being kind of the zealous one for the Lord. But they're going to kind of pressure him into doing it. And then Jehoiada is going to be his servant, and he's got his mangled hand and stuff. So they have to enter into the city. They probably get questioned by the guards on the outside of the city, and they're there to worship Dagon, the holy fools in the temple. So eventually David, later in the episode, is going to pretend like he's mad, and he's going to start like spitting and like foaming at the mouth and stuff like that. And that David is kind of drawing on this idea at the time that people who, either like had, epilepsy or like who just acted in a bizarre way were actually like messengers of the gods, or were in some way like kind of protected by the gods. And so we'll establish that concept earlier on as Jehoiada and Abiathar are touring through the city. They'll also see evidence of the raids on the Israelites, the raids on Keilah. They'll see kind of like, I don't know, like some of the produce that's getting brought back or whatever. And so that'll cue them in that like not only is this kind of generally a enemy city, but they're actually like actively attacking Israelite territory. Then we'll cut back to the Hittite. He arrives back at Saul's court. He reports seeing David go into the city, and Saul's immediately going to think that David is betraying him, which kind of is a little bit, and that he's going to join the Philistines and fight against him. And so he sends the Hittite back with orders to kind of do a little bit of subterfuge. So the Hittite, when he gets back, instead of like trying to like, he acts as if David is still in good standing with Saul, and he claimed like he basically accuses the Philistines of kidnapping one of Saul's loyal servants. And so the point of that ploy is basically to make the Philistines. And he'll also bring up the little poetry line, David has killed his thousands, and Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And so the point of that ploy is for them to make sure they don't know kind of the details of what's going on with David and the Philistines, but they want the Philistines to turn against David and kill him for Saul. And so they're thinking that if they basically make the Philistines think that David is one of Saul's servants, that the Philistines will just kill him because they'll think that he's plotting some sort of subterfuge against them or whatever. Does that make sense? Or we can pause there. Good. Okay. And then, so that'll be kind of the big cliffhanger is kind of the Hittite puncturing the David's secret identity or whatever. And then Act 3 will open up. Jehoiada will catch the Philistine commanders debating about what to do about David. Some of them are going to want to like kill him right away. Some of them are going to be more hesitant, wanting to kind of hear him out. So we'll hear some of their back and forth. Abiathar will eventually sneak in to warn David about what's going on, because presumably David doesn't know that the Philistines have found out who he is. But even though Abiathar warns David, David will initially think that he could still like pull this off, and he may think that he actually still has better chances winning over the Philistines than he does with Saul, who has shown himself to be ruthless in his pursuit of David. But then Abiathar will pull out an additional piece of information and tell David about how Gath is like actively raiding the Israelites in Keilah, and so basically, like, if David decides to join them, to join the Philistines, he's going to put them in the position of having to participate in raids on Israelite cities. And David has like a moment of conscience where he realizes he probably shouldn't be joining up with the enemy of God's, the enemy of God's people. And so they decide to pretend that David is one of the holy fools, and that Abiathar is actually like his handler, like someone who is like kind of in charge of watching over him. When the Philistines get this impression that David is actually mad and not the real David, they decide to expel him. Let me pause there.
So when you say holy fools, what does that mean?
So what I was saying before, how it seems like, so this story, this whole like plot line, I'm taking out of Samuel, so it is in there, and in that story, when the Philistines find out who David is, and it looks like they're gonna like go after him, David decides to pretend like he starts like foaming at the mouth and like acting like mad, basically, and so they think that he's actually like a mad person. Maybe he's just like claiming that he's David, but they don't like kill him, because in kind of a ancient culture context, people who were like epileptic or who showed signs of like madness and stuff like that were thought to be like potentially like conduits of the gods, like they were being like maybe possessed by a spirit or something like that, or potentially like prophets. And so that's kind of the concept that I'm drawing on there.
Gotcha. Sorry, I know you explained that. I just didn't attach it for some reason to where it said holy fool.
Oh, yeah.
I just missed that. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've got maybe. Go ahead.
Just because it's on that. Yeah, I know I've already brought up humor, but like, what would be the ways to kind of bring up, like, you could imagine, like, okay, what do you think would actually be most effective? Like try and play it very like straight and not humorous, and like, would that be effective for like today's audience where like this is like so removed and different? I mean, you could explain it either way, but it's like, do you think it's kind of ripe for being a little more humorous and that being a little more effective, or like what do you think? It doesn't have to be funny. I'm just wondering, what do you actually think would be more effective? And I'm even wondering, like, would it work? Like, I'm trying to imagine actors like watching a show where this isn't funny and it just being like kind of bizarre because it's so.
My suggestion I was going to have might actually kind of tie into that a little bit. So it's kind of a radical. It'd be kind of restructuring the format. So my idea would be, because there's a whole bunch of like, there's like an interesting reveal of what David's actually doing. You know, that he's not actually going there. I think if you did it, if you restructured it to where Act 1 is entirely from the Hittites' point of view, we see him following David and the rest of these people as they, what's he doing? You know, where's he going? He's going to meet the Philistines. What? And then all the way to where he, you know, yells out traitor. And then Act 2, we go back and we follow David this time. And we see what his actual plan is, that he wasn't going there to betray. And now we see their plans step by step from his point of view, where we could put a lot of that humor in, where they're trying to sneak in and they're having to pretend to be priests and all that kind of stuff. And So that way, at least we go through that whole first act where we're not even sure, what's he doing? Why is he there? Is he a traitor? Is he turning against his people? What's happening there? Because there is that, it is kind of like that situation where you're like, what is going on with that? Why is he doing that? And I think there's an interesting reveal that it could be kind of like a boom. Here's what's really happening is not what we thought it was, like what we thought the Hittite thought it was.
The only thing is, like, I mean, I'm not sure if David isn't potentially like on the verge of betraying, like, because even like in the biblical story that we're drawing on, like the only reason that David doesn't end up like joining the Philistines is basically because he realizes that they, like, once they find out who he is, that they're going to kill him or whatever. And so, like, yeah, actually, or within the structure that I'm doing, it's not that David the entire time has like been like plotting something else and then he decides to like turn around. It's that David actually is like, he's looking for safety by joining up the Philistines, but then it's only kind of as a result of some of the events that happen that he realizes that that's like not a good plan, and he has to like change course, and he's forced to kind of do this ridiculous pretending like he's mad sort of thing to escape. And so, like, yeah, that at least is kind of where I'm coming at it from, but I see what you're saying.
That all makes sense. The only thing, it's like it's just such a weird sequence of events that it's like, what made him think that this was something that was going to work in the first place, to where he had to pivot in the middle of it to something equally weird. It's like, was that the best plan out of all the different things he could have done, is to try to get in with the Philistines? I mean, it makes sense if you're doing it on purpose. It's a lot less if you didn't have that plan going in. But I mean, like, everything you have works fine. I'm just thinking it might be a way to add some tension to it, to where we don't know what's happening until we see it from a different point of view.
I guess on your plan, what is David's purpose like for going?
Well, in that version of it, it would be more deliberate that he's not going to betray Saul. That wasn't necessarily what he's going to do. I mean, it looks like it externally, no matter what nuances he has to the Hittite, that's going to look like that's what he's going to go do. And if we're following the Hittite, then that's what our perspective is going to be. It's like his actions all look exactly like that's what he's going to do. And then when you see it through the second time through, then you see what the real plan was. Even if the plan wasn't necessarily to do that, you kind of see, okay, I see what he's doing. Oh, okay.
So what do you think the real plan would be, though?
Well, it could still be. I think it's got to be something. He's got to have a plan that ends up not working, that he has to pivot. So whatever that is, either he was going there just to be, a wolf in sheep's clothing, hiding among the people. I mean, we're going to have him go and offer to, to fight against the Philistines' enemies? I mean, is that what we're going to say he's doing? Is that, whatever you need me to do, or what's his offer to them?
Yeah, I mean, basically what he ends up doing, he will end up doing by like season 2, which is, like he basically comes under the command of the Philistines. Now, in that story, like, he does avoid like directly attacking the Israelites. He does kind of some subterfuge where he claims that he's been attacking the Israelites, and instead he's attacking some of the peoples of the land, and making sure there's no signs of what he's been doing. So maybe he has something like that in mind, where he's although actually kind of within my storyline, he hasn't really kind of thought that far ahead, I guess. Like, he's just
I mean, that could be a good argument people in his circle have. It's like, what's going to happen whenever they tell us to go fight Israel? What do we do then? We'll figure it out when that happens.
Yeah.
I'll come up with something. But now this is what we need. It's just like it's the best option in a bunch of worse options that he's got to pick between. That could be how that could be.
Well, that was what I was thinking would be kind of the thing that Abiathar uses to help him see that this is a bad plan when he is like refusing to give up on his plan, is basically forcing David to confront like more concretely, like, if you keep going through with this and they don't like kill you, but they allow you to join them, then basically you're going to be joining the ranks of the Philistines as they are attacking our cities. One quick note, I am doing like a little bit of like rearranging of things. So in terms of the biblical text, this story takes place a little bit earlier, but I brought it forward so that I can kind of make the choice that David is making a little more have a little more contrast, so that it's not just like David kind of going to the Philistines and deciding like, oh, they're going to kill me, but he's actually going to end up kind of going from like, I'm going to go to the Philistines and seek safety with them, and do a 180 and instead go and like go fight the Philistines as they're attacking Israelite city. So I don't know. Yeah,
just reading the Bible itself motivationally, this is one of the confusing parts to me, where I'm like having to just go with it, because it doesn't make any logical sense that this would be a plan that somebody would come up with deliberately.
Yeah, but I mean, like
that, so
I guess like in David's head, he's thinking, well, the Philistine, like, I am like a great warrior. The Philistines are going to have to acknowledge that. And within the structure that I'm putting it, that David hides his identity at first because he's hoping to be able to demonstrate like, I'm a strong warrior. I could bring you guys a lot, before then revealing who he is, so that like they can start to like, before they like kind of shoot down the idea, they start to entertain it a little bit, because they see that he's a great warrior and that he could potentially be kind of a fifth column against Saul. So I can see how David might think that, if I get the Philistines on my side, then basically they'll help me overthrow Saul. They'll want to install me kind of as they'd be seeing it as like, ooh, we can install him as a puppet king. And so like David kind of might be having kind of that more almost Machiavellian kind of approach, and thinking that he can use the Philistines to prop him up, and he has to get kind of pulled back from that.
He's a little arrogant in his thinking.
Yeah,
possibly. Just one other aspect of it is like, this is the guy that stopped the Philistines from, basically they were getting ready to conquer Israel if a champion did not rise up and kill Goliath. Yep. This is the guy that stopped him. And isn't that Goliath's sword that he's carrying?
Oh, that's a good point. He'll probably
that might be an interesting way for that. That's how he can maybe be revealed. It's like, hey, I recognize that sword. Not that he would carry it around in public.
Yeah, he might like leave it with the camp just to but that's a good point. Yeah. But
that's all Chad, the fun of narratively figuring that out.
Yeah. Chad, back to your point. I definitely think there's room for, like, even though the structure of the episode is dramatic, like, there's action, there's kind of thriller elements. So like I don't see this as like a, it's not like a farcical episode, but there's going to be a lot of like character humor in there, like the humor of Abiathar, the zealous priest, like kind of having to hold his nose and pretend to be a pagan. There might even be like humor with like Jehoiada being his servant or whatever. And then definitely like I could see humor in David acting mad and like really like going over the top to try to convince them that that he's crazy. So
nice. Well, I guess once it got into my head, the idea that it could be just be funny at points, then I was having a hard time picturing like, wait, what would it look like to not have it be funny and have like, that's like harder for me to picture actually as like as someone just like in the audience, right? Like a viewer. I don't know how it could be done, I'm sure. But like the whole holy fool stuff is just kind of ripe for, because he's pretending and there's a bunch of pretending going on. And so, anyways, it's kind of a side
it probably is the
just,
kind of thing where like in real life, like it probably was fun, like maybe not in the maybe not in the moment, like, but they, looking back on it, it's probably the kind of thing that they laughed about.
That could actually be like, if there's any sort of like small talk or something at the end of the episode where they're like recapping anything, be like, what was that? Like making fun of something he did while he was going crazy.
Yeah. That's a good example of the kind of things you could do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And if it's not a plan that they've thought out ahead of time, then just the scrambling to try to figure out how to put it into play. It's like who knows something about Dagon? Okay, that's you. Okay, all right, you got to put this little hat on. It's like, what do I do? I don't know. Just go with me on this.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, and then Act 4. So after they finally escape, David's going to tell the camp about what they discovered, that Gath has been raiding Israel, and most of his men are going to not want to get involved because their whole purpose in coming out here was to try to seek safety. They came to get shelter among the Philistines. Now David is telling them that they're going to go back into the heart of Israel, expose themselves by, fighting a battle, draw attention to themselves. And David himself is going to be reluctant about it because, he also was wanting to try to find safety for his people. But Abiathar will kind of push him to inquire of God and not just go with his gut. As a result of that, God's going to reveal that he wants David to go. And so the men are going to have to set off for Keilah. And then the episode will end with the Hittite seeing them heading out and kind of heading off to report to Saul that David is heading into Israel. Yeah, Chip.
Yeah. For like the first like half of like our conversation of this episode, I was thinking like, okay, like I get like trying to like work through like the plot and like I don't know, and things you need to think through, like to make sure there aren't holes or that like character motivations make sense. But it was kind of like, and then you started talking about seeking safety and security. I was like, okay, I feel like we're touching on a theme here, right?
Yep.
And then just seeing how you wrapped it up with Act 4, it's like, oh, boom, there it is. Like that plays. And I don't know, do you have to, in a show like this, do you have to play into like the key major theme every episode, or just at certain key junctures? Like, obviously you need to have some sort of message. Otherwise it's just people moving around doing things. But like, so that's like, I guess one just kind of more general question of like the philosophy of TV or whatever. Like, I can see like sorry, I'm trying to get out a question here to you, Kevin. I can see like the main theme kind of coming out here. So I guess 2 questions then. One, do you have to do that every episode or just at select points? And then 2, how would you kind of, just like laying it out on the table, how do you see with how this, where we get from beginning to end with this episode, what's like how does it, how would you describe like the message of the episode and how that relates to the key kind of major theme of the show?
Yeah, so I definitely think like over the course of a season, you're going to have multiple themes like play out in different episodes. The kind of whatever like your kind of major themes are, they're going to probably be important. They may, you might have an episode that like hits like right on it, or you might also kind of get different nuances of it, or kind of some sub themes or related ideas that you'll kind of develop in different episodes. But like it may not always, like you might have some episodes that are more closely hitting on it and others that are maybe developing kind of some related ideas or whatever. But the movement of the season as a whole is trying to hammer home that idea. And then as far as you're right that was kind of the theme that I was going for here is David having to decide, like, so early on he's seeking a false form of safety by going to the Philistines, and then that kind of ends up falling through as a result of the different stuff that happens. And he's fortunate enough that his men are able to pull him out of the pickle that he gets himself in because of what he's been seeking. But then he has to kind of have the courage to tell the rest of the men, not only are we going to not take this like false form of safety, but we're actually going to put ourselves at even more risk than we would have to by directly facing the enemy. Yeah,
I like that it goes from that, I don't know if this is the message, but it's like that instinct for self like preservation or security, which is natural at some level, but like when that's out of whack, like then it's just much more tempting to turn to, I don't know, like David comes up with his own weird plan, like and at the end he I don't know if he gets to a place where he feels like he's just trusting in God's, like what am I trying to say? He's trusting enough in God to inquire about what he should do, and it kind of leads him to be thinking about the security and safety of others, even at the expense of his own, like at the risk of himself. And so, just that outward kind of focus that like trusting in God can lead to. Do you kind of see that with this episode?
Yeah, and there's also definitely like a kind of allegiance or loyalty would also be kind of a important part of the episode as well. Like, do you ally yourself with the enemy of God's people, or do you choose to remain loyal to God's people even when they are an enemy to you? So that would also kind of be an important element, I think.
Okay, yeah. Is there, I can't remember like what you came up with as far as like the rules for inquiring of God. How does he kind of decide that this is the time to do that?
So I think when we talked about it, we said that inquiring of God would primarily be done with the Urim and Thummim, and the answers would be therefore kind of limited. So in this case, this is like an instance in the Bible where we're told that that David inquired of God about whether he should go down to Keilah or not. He actually inquires twice. is like the first time he's like, should I go down? And God's like, yep, go down. And then like he's like, but Saul will like get me, but God's like, get down or go down and I'll deliver your enemies into your hands or whatever. And so yeah, we may just have it be something where Abiathar is using the Urim and Thummim kind of as lots, and he gets the lot that says go down. Like he basically has like a binary, like should I go down or should I not? And that keeps coming up. Although I think we also discovered that in another passage it mentions that God in theory can answer either through the Urim and Thummim or through a dream or through a prophet as well. But I think in this case, it may not require more than just the Urim and Thummim.
But when we talked about like what causes them to not use it all the time, I remember talking about like that, you're opening yourself up to risks, that like,
I think basically what we settled on was like, if you use it, then you kind of lose freedom, basically. Like, so like in this circumstance, like David is going to be reluctant to use it because he knows what he wants to do. Like he doesn't want to go down to Keilah. He wants to remain in safety. So it's kind of like when you know the right thing, or like you like resist like finding out more information because you're oh, if I find out, then I'm gonna I might find out that I actually have to do something uncomfortable. So it would be kind of that kind of situation where the like drama isn't like, like the drama is like choosing to do that, even though it means like oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do that now.
Sorry, it just reminds me of like you don't want to find out too much about like someone, like a friend who's moving. Like you don't want to ask like, when are you moving? And because then they might ask you to help them move. Best to know as little as possible. But could this episode open with like, would it make sense at all for it to be framed by like that David eyes like the Urim and Thummim and like at the beginning about basically what his next move should be or about some decision to make, and he opts not to utilize that.
I like that.
I don't know what that would be at the beginning. Can you, if you like it, what would you then what would you kind of put forth as like,
so how I was mentioning like that David would have to like explain his plan to his men before like turning himself in. So we could actually have Abiathar say like let's inquire with God and like see if this is what God wants. And David like turns down like, and he could like come up with some sort of like kind of like holy explanation for how
he could be like, I think I had a dream actually.
Well, I don't know if I want him like to be like totally deceitful or something like that, but like it could be more like, I don't want to like bother God, or like I don't know, something like that, where like we get the sense that underneath it, like he doesn't want to he doesn't want to ask God because he doesn't want God to say no to his idea. It's a good because that would also kind of hammer home some of the themes more.
Thematically too, in a way, this is almost like a foreshadowing of how Christians are supposed to go into the heart of the enemy and not, or like Daniel and the rest of the Israelites. You're not supposed to go and hide away. You're supposed to go in the middle of the danger. I mean, we wouldn't have to be explicit about it, but that could be kind of the same underlying ideas behind why we need to stay in the world.
Mm,
And they're going in the middle. They're going to be protected
mm,
if they obey God, even though they're in the middle of the enemy's camp.
mm. Yeah, that's good. You guys good with this one? Should we
Mhm.
move on to?
Good.
Okay, so this is kind of like really following on the heels of that one. So
Mhm.
this one's Keilah. Once again, we'll cold open on the Philistines attacking Keilah, but this time they'll be surprised as David and his outlaws appear, and we'll get like a battle scene where the outlaws defeat some Philistine soldiers and deliver Keilah. And then Act 1, we'll see the outlaws kind of welcomed as heroes by the city of Keilah. And we'll have the Hittite reporting to Saul, telling him that David has gone to Keilah. Saul will muster the Israelites with the plan of like going to Keilah and basically telling them to surrender David or die. And Jonathan, when he hears about Saul's plan, is going to send his servant Benaiah to go warn David about what's happening. Act 2, the outlaws, they're happy in the city. They're enjoying being the heroes and everything. But we'll have Abiathar feeling uneasy about things, and that's going to like annoy some of the other outlaws. And we'll kind of distance him from some of them because they'll be like, we're happy here, like things are great, like why are you raining on our parade, basically. Then we'll cut back. We'll see Saul's army setting out. The Hittite will be sent ahead as like a scout or something, or maybe to go check on Keilah or something like that. And as he does so, he ends up seeing Benaiah, and he pursues him. Benaiah will escape, and he'll reach either he'll get to the city or just outside the city. Like maybe Abiathar is like taking a walk, getting away from things, but somehow it'll kind of be orchestrated that Benaiah will meet Abiathar, but he won't go into the city because we don't want him reunited with his father yet. But he'll warn Abiathar that Saul is sending his army and that David and his men need to go. Let me pause there. Any questions at this point?
That's good.
I'll keep.
Wait. What do Benaiah and Jehoiada know about each other's whereabouts?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Jehoiada doesn't necessarily know that Benaiah is in the court of Saul at this point. So we want to kind of keep that a little bit of a secret. That'll come up. That'll get revealed actually next episode to him. So that's why I'm wanting to keep it secret. And Abiathar doesn't necessarily like recognize who Benaiah is at this point, so he won't know what's going on.
Wait, does Benaiah know that his dad is in there?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so Benaiah doesn't know that his dad has joined David's outlaws. Yeah.
Got
it. So then Act 3, Abiathar is going to be warning David and his men that Saul is setting out to get them. The men are going to kind of be doubting him. So again, Abiathar will challenge David to inquire of God. And to kind of like differentiate, like this time, like the men saw him do this like last episode, and they're gonna like feel like frustrated. It's gonna feel to them like every time Abiathar wants David to do something, he like tells him to inquire of God, and some of them, may even suspect that he's like manipulating it or whatever, and that it's a trick. So that'll create some tension among them. And David even is gonna like question whether he should, but he'll ultimately inquire from God, and discover as a result of that the people of Keilah are going to hand them over to Saul's. First of all, that Saul's coming for them, and then second of all, that the people of Keilah will hand them over. And then meanwhile, on his way back, Benaiah is going to get picked up by the Hittite who saw him go into the city. Good there. And then Act 4, the Hittite is going to question Benaiah and consider reporting him to Saul. The outlaws are going to be escaping from the city, trying to not be seen. Abiathar, he'll have some sort of moment where he gets to kind of prove himself to the men who've been frustrated with him throughout the episode, maybe by like creating a distraction or doing something that helps them escape. The elders of the city will discover that the outlaws have fled, and by the end of the episode, they're going to have to report that to Saul, and someone will probably get killed as a result of that. And the Hittite will see that messenger get killed, and he's going to have mercy on Benaiah and let him go without reporting what he did. And Saul's army is going to go pursue the outlaws into the wild. And meanwhile, like kind of as a closing thing, Abiathar, like Jehoiada might like mention his son, and for the first time between the two of them, he'll like mention his son's name, and Abiathar will have met his son and heard his name, and he'll finally like put two and two together and realize like, oh shoot, like that was Jehoiada's son. Yeah, so questions, ideas?
I just like that's a good way to end that episode. Kind of a
Yeah, or which
cliffhanger.
part? Like basically, Act 1 has like the source material, right? Well, let's see here.
Actually, there's
Hold on.
the source material is a little bit kind of woven throughout. David does inquire with God about whether Saul is coming, and whether the city is going to betray him over to Saul. So that's Act 3.
Okay.
And then they flee before Saul gets there. Yeah, so I am like elaborating out a bit and like creating like the tension with like Abiathar and the men and stuff like that. But yeah.
Gotcha. What about the thematically for this episode? What do you? That's not a skeptical question, but it's like last time it was like, oh, I'm not always great at picking those things up, but I picked it up a little more. Maybe it's because it was a little more on the nose.
Yeah.
How do you see this episode? What do you see as like? Maybe it's not the one of the major themes, but like, what do you see as like beyond just like kind of moving the plot forward, or what do you see as like from the beginning to the end? Like, what do we learn, or what do some of the characters learn?
Yeah. So Abiathar is having to like basically have the hard conversation and push people and say the unpopular thing. And like it ultimately proves to be right, but it's going to be hard for him to do that because the men are frustrated with him. So like I think like courage or like kind of doing the hard thing will be a part of it. Because
it's almost, this is like a semi-spotlight episode for him. If anybody's got a little bit more of the focus, and you can kind of layer that story through the whole episode, that arc for him.
Yep. Yeah. Um, yeah. And like kind of not, there's also a little bit of like not trusting in like appearances. So like it seems like the people of Keilah are welcoming them and are on their side. It seems like everything's like working out grandly, and like that they finally found their home, and they did the right thing. You know, they came to fight the Philistines, and like it's going to seem like God rewarded them by like providing them with a safe haven where they can finally get rest from like constantly being on the road. Like I think that's going to kind of be the mindset of the rest of the Outlaws, is the sense that like, you know, God, we did what God said, God's rewarded us. Like, you know, why do you kind of constantly have to keep like be seeing like problems where there isn't, or danger where there isn't any. And so Abiathar is going to be like kind of pushing them to look beyond kind of what would be convenient for them, or what they would like to believe, kind of.
With the Hittite, remind me, was it him that didn't participate in like the killing of the priests at Nob?
Yeah, I didn't go into detail when I was talking to you about it, but in that episode, we kind of frame it as like the priest of Nob shows like a lot of like courage in like standing up to Saul, and that his like kind of courageous example almost like wins the Hittite over. Or,
but
like,
not so much that he leaves Saul.
Yeah.
Okay, so is this kind of like over time, are we supposed to be seeing like him more like conflicted with his participation with Saul? So it says here, just the Hittite has mercy on Benaiah. So can you walk me through like what do you feel like? What's the development for like what causes that act of mercy at the end, and then where? So basically, like where do you see the Hittite at the beginning of this episode, and then how does he get to that point, and then like where's that going to be, like what does that open up now for like for him next, for what's coming next?
That's a good point. So I think that he'll probably, when he catches Benaiah, he'll probably like learn a little bit about him, and there will be something about that he learns about Benaiah that kind of like conjures a little bit of sympathy for him. But he's also over the past few episodes, we've been kind of widening the gap between him and Saul's forces, and again, like kind of seeing Saul's kind of ruthlessness and killing kind of the messengers. And Benaiah in this case, like he is just kind of serving Jonathan and following orders for.
Well, there's
for
your
Jonathan.
connection right there. Is that he's got that connection to Saul. Jonathan has that connection to Saul. That would kind of give a little bit more trust for the Hittite. Just there's like he's not just a random person. He's like a servant of the person he's currently serving.
Has Benaiah been? Is he relatively flat at this point as a character, or is he like been rounded out a little more? Because I could see that playing into it if he's kind of in that. We've talked about that kind of the four quadrants of like if he kind of represents like the surprising, you know, the one who has good ends and good means of like he's he represents like one of the stronger kind of moral spiritual examples. And could it be that like, you know, in his interactions with the Hittite, like that somehow comes out, and instead of it just seeming naive, that actually like in his youthfulness that the Hittite actually sees something that he admires, and then that being something that like is drawing, you know, if we're looking again at those four quadrants, he has like those, what do we say? He's got like good means, but bad ends, sort of like, could this be the thing that one of the things that's contributes to him kind of um, yeah, I don't know what the right word is, but yeah, coming
Helping
to see.
change it.
What was that? Sorry.
Oh, just kind of like helping change him or helping shift
it
his.
kind of
Well, yeah,
started
and it
with
could
the
specifically be like changing him, like to see why something about Yahweh, right?
Yeah.
That like he, yeah, I don't know if we want to.
Well, and I was just thinking this actually fits well with like, you know, he had the priest who was also kind of, at least in that final moment, like this like example that he like really admired, and that really like affected him. And then actually in episode 2, I didn't mention this, but he has some moments with David's father Jesse where he's actually very impressed by Jesse as well, and is helped by Jesse. So we keep giving him these moments where he's like seeing kind of this kind of beautiful righteousness in these men that he's interacting with, and at the same time he's seeing kind of this like ugly wickedness in the people that he that he's been helping, and so like yeah, I like that a lot of it is just like some like about Benaiah himself and kind of his purity and his dedication. Yeah.
Well, also in that episode 2, doesn't Abiathar kind of fix him up battle wounds on the? So there's like slow connections of like, hey, these people aren't so bad, kind of slowly building in his world too.
Oh, so actually in episode 2, Abiathar, he fixes up Asahel, so not
He doesn't do it with him too. So I thought we'd said maybe he was
not that might be
because the Hittite was also injured. Who fixed up the Hittite? I thought we decided that could be Abiathar also.
potentially, yeah. I could think about that. Like I didn't have that specifically in mind, but that is an interesting idea to allow him to have yet even more kind of reason to be sympathetic. Yeah, Chad.
Yeah, knowing that he has like kind of this moral code, he has ethical or moral like kind of convictions that he finds resonance with, characters maybe like Benaiah or with is it Ahimelech?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? What lack then does he see? He sees not just like something he resonates with, but also like presumably some sort of lack in his own heart or character. Like there's something that's missing. So this is more of like a theological question playing out this character. But Kevin or Victor, like what do you see as the thing that is missing and that he's starting to maybe perceive is missing? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. So like what is it that he not only like affirms in them but actually admires because he sees it draws...
and the flip side of that is that he starts to not like he sees something in them that he doesn't see in himself. That he's like, they have something that I don't. Like what would you say that is?
This could be as simple as like a faith, sincerity, because he will have seen Saul saying a lot of the same things but not meaning it or not embodying it, and now he's around all these people who are on the run and doing all kinds of nonsensical looking things with seemingly the faith and blessing of God. They're more faithful about it.
Faith, definitely, and then but maybe also like loyalty along with that, like this like conviction or like commit, because like as far as like looking at himself, he has like his moral code, but he doesn't have a loyalty to anything. Like he's rudderless. He doesn't have he doesn't have anything to trust in outside of himself, and he also doesn't have anyone to be loyal to, like to really dedicate himself to outside himself. So he sees in them that they have like that they have this this allegiance that that means that he like lacks, because the team that he is, like, he's allied only in like a mercenary sense to Saul. Like, he doesn't believe in the cause that he's fighting for.
Could it be that he just like is, kind of has a cynical view of, the, I don't know, Israelite religion, because the people he's around that are Israelites, like, they're just like, it's not winsome. It's something that he actually finds morally like repugnant at times, and doesn't like. Could it be that kind of like similar to how I was literally just talking to someone today, actually, as a chaplain, like someone who, just had very negative perception of, the Christian faith, because his experience of, what he had witnessed in churches was just something where he's like, I don't really want to be a part of that. Just surrounded by, bad examples. But then it can, so that's something that people can relate to today. That's not that and that is like a layer of like, when you're thinking about the storytelling, it's like what it means to the viewers, that like, how does this map on to like, oh, like this is pretty similar to something like that we experience today. And there are, people that have, bad experiences or perceptions of the church, rightly or wrongly. It can be exposure to like real, like sincere faith, and the beauty of that and the fruit of that can cause a change, I guess.
I'm
Also-
imagining that. Real quick, I'm imagining that the Hittite, as like a mercenary who, this is probably isn't even the first like nation that he served or whatever. Like, he probably just kind of sees all, all ancient religions as equivalent, and like the Israelites, they've got yet another god, and they've got like, he kind of sees it as like another empty thing, not much different than anything else that he's seen, until he like sees these men who they have like this real loyalty and this real faith in their God, that's like different and like beautiful or whatever. And that speaks to there being something unique that isn't like what he's seen in Saul and the other Israelites. Sorry, Victor.
What I was going to say is, like, if we look all the way at the end of his story, his undoing is that he was 100% loyal to David. So I think that clearly shows that he wanted to believe in somebody enough to have that much loyalty. So it's like that could be what he's missing.
Yes.
He's giving that loyalty to Saul, and it's being wasted on him. You could tell that he wants to be a part of a team, or a part of something that's bigger than him.
Oh,
And
that makes it so.
He slowly starts to see that it's with David, not with Saul.
But that then makes it like
it's way more tragic.
Goes like that much more tragic.
Yeah, it's like
that he.
The more we talk about the Hittite, the sadder I get. the better, the more we know about him. It's like, I hate what we're going to be doing to you here, buddy. We didn't write that. We didn't write that part of the story, but that's written.
Yeah. And like it's on people's minds, so like it's a layer.
It's ironic tragedy. Yeah, it's just
That's good. Anything else on this episode?
Cool. We're all good. Okay, everything has been around fleeing, so I mean, we've had those first 4 episodes are all thematically tied to that, which I like.
Okay, this one I didn't sketch out in as much detail, but in part because like following a lot more, kind of the story gets like a lot more detail in the biblical account. So we talked about like potentially having like a scene where some of the men are like kind of exchanging stories, and maybe even potentially doing the David versus Goliath via flashback, either from like multiple perspectives or from one of the men, So I thought that for the cold open, we could have that finally get around to that David versus Goliath story, potentially by Jehoiada or by one of the other men. And so we can like finally get that moment and see kind of David's courage and faith. And then from there, Act 1, the Outlaws, they're hiding in a cave. They're exchanging stories over campfire, or probably not a campfire if they're in a cave, but as they're kind of hiding out in the cave. And Abiathar will, he in the end of last episode, he realized about Benaiah, and he'll finally reveal that information to Jehoiada, that his son is one of the servants, or a servant in the household of Saul. And and Abiathar will be moved by kind of the grief of Jehoiada. We'll have them by this point have like become friends, so that'll kind of it'll give Jehoiada a reason to want David to take out Saul, but it'll also kind of amplify Abiathar's desire to have Saul taken out, because he feels for his friend as well. And then the act will close out with the men hearing Saul and them hiding. So there will be a little suspense of like, at first maybe they think that like Saul's men are coming to get them or whatever, and so they're just going to be hiding out. But then Act 2, they realize that Saul isn't coming to get them. He's just coming to take a dump. And so then we'll get them get some whispered debates over what to do. And Abiathar will really be kind of pushing for David to go take out Saul. So in the biblical text, we aren't told who, but someone tells him, like, this is the day that the Lord promised that he'd give your enemy into your hand or whatever. So we could actually have Abiathar do that, so that it kind of has a little more weight, because he's the priest. So I even thought we could plant back in episode 1, Abiathar delivering some sort of word, or maybe his father delivering some sort of prophetic word about how the Lord is going to give David's enemy into his hand, where like the original word might be more ambiguous as far as like what David should do. But Abiathar kind of really tries to press home and tell David to go get him. And so David will go, and as in the biblical story, before he initially is thinking he's gonna kill Saul, but he's struck by his conscience, and instead of killing him, he cuts the corner of his robe and brings it back with him, and that'll close out Act 2. Let me pause there. Questions, thoughts?
What are we saying is David's ultimate reason why he doesn't kill him? What convinces him?
I think we could probably, actually, maybe instead of David versus Goliath in the cold open, I wonder if it would be better to get a moment of David and Saul, for us to see kind of their
when he's young and playing the what is it, the lyre? Is that what he's
playing? Yeah, maybe that.
Maybe that moment, just to kind of flash back to that, to show them in better times. And
yeah, I like that. And so then we could get like a quick flash of that just before he strikes, and then that causes him to I mean, we don't want it to just be the personal element, because the story does emphasize kind of his respect for Yahweh and stuff, and Saul being the anointed. So we could potentially do something where we both establish kind of the personal relationship in that opening scene, but also David kind of David's like kind of reverence for Saul as like the anointed of Yahweh, and so we can kind of like draw on like both of those things as the stuff that kind of holds David back. Yeah. Good. And then from there, David's going to return. He'll tell the men what happened, and there's going to be like some frustration about it. Yeah, Jehoiada and Abiathar and other men as well. And so like, yeah, there's going to kind of be some back and forth. And he's going to have to like convince them, like maybe even, you know, someone wants to go do it himself, like, and he has to like try to, you know, keep them from going and killing Saul. But he'll eventually like kind of win them over, get them to stand down. But then he tells them that he's actually going to go out and confront Saul face to face, or not face to face, but he's going to go out just as he does in the biblical story. And then Act 4, we'll get David's big speech to Saul that's in the Bible. So like, you know, David basically says like, you know, reveals to Saul like, you know, I could have killed you, but I didn't. You know, why have you come after me? You know, yeah, he kind of expresses his reverence for Saul and doesn't know why Saul is hunting his life to kill it, and kind of invokes Yahweh to judge between them, but promises not to raise his own hand against Saul. So that'll be like a real like charged moment, and the Hittite will be there to watch the speech, and so that'll be yet another moment where, now he gets to see like David himself kind of demonstrating that kind of beautiful allegiance and faith that he lacks. And we won't get like a lot of like processing with him, but we'll just kind of get the sense that he's impressed by the speech. Meanwhile, like Doeg, you know, is just going to kind of be like scoffing at it, which will bother the Hittite even more. You know that you know he saw this beautiful thing, and none of Saul's men seem like to realize or care, you know, about the righteousness of the person that they're seeking after. And then will Jehoiada and Benaiah will have them like kind of catch like a fleeting glimpse of each other before Saul's men head out. So like they'll finally both realize that you know, Jehoiada will realize that he's already realized that Benaiah is with Saul's servants, but he'll actually get to see him, and then Benaiah will see that his father is with David's men. Yeah, Chad.
I actually like, I think the beginning being is a good moment to do the David and Goliath story at the beginning, because it's like you're basically putting side by side like these two moments of greatness for David, right? And it's like, what makes David great, you know? And it's even appropriate that, so this is what I'm trying to put together. And again, I don't know what you sketched out in the first two episodes wholly for Jehoiada, but it's like, you can imagine him being a really good person, especially if you want to round him out a little more in this episode, where it's like, he kind of starts it and ends it, right? Where he's like going on, you know, kind of amazed at David's courage and willingness to fight, you know, and, you know, stand up to evil and you know, the Philistines, I guess, and or their enemies. And let's see here, you would, you know, I guess he knows that his son is with Saul, then Saul is like the enemy now, right? And he wants David to go and do what you did. You could see him not being won over, maybe in Act 3. It'd be interesting to hear what that conversation is, because you have these different perspectives, and I don't know where each character's necessarily. It needs to like reflect where each of them are at the moment, right? Like in their kind of their own arc. So Abiathar, if he's, I can't remember where he's at, but like maybe still wanting vengeance. Jehoiada, just now having learned that his son is with Saul, like he might be, fighting against David the most. And
oh no.
Let's here, we can keep chatting for a second. Maybe
I like where that was going.
Yeah, no, Chad won me back over to having the David versus Goliath cold open. We could still do like this. This outline is a little more like
fungible,
not as like detailed, or it doesn't have as much stuff happening as other ones. So I could easily see including like starting with that David versus Goliath cold open, but then having a flashback to David and Saul to establish that same point.
Well, here's a question, kind of going back to something we talked about a couple episodes ago: is what kind of interaction will Benaiah and David have had that we'll have seen? Because I know we kind of talked about maybe having David see Benaiah and Benaiah himself at that same time, or from that same age, and kind of parallel. And that could be a way to make him think back to his Goliath days too. But when would they have come into contact with each other?
Yeah, so Benaiah's the sorry. Benaiah's the younger Jehoiada's son. So
he's the messenger boy, basically.
So I don't think he'll have met David yet. So we potentially were thinking that he'll get his he will eventually get to meet them, but I think that'll come in the second half of the season. So like that'll happen, but I think not yet for this episode. Chad, I was just saying that you kind of did win me back over on having the cold open do the David versus Goliath, because of how that speaks to kind of Jehoiada's, like, his expectations about what David would do with his enemy. But then we could still potentially have some like a flashback when with David, as David is like contemplating killing Saul. We could still get like his flashback to him and Saul. Did you have more that you were wanting to say before you got cut off?
I think it was just that Jehoiada could. Oh, I was saying that when they're having that in Act 3, that kind of argument or that conversation could just be really interesting, because that's where you're highlighting these different perspectives with the characters, where they're at, you want to make the tension feel like really real, and the viewers really feel it too. Yeah. It shouldn't just be obvious that David is right, and because or if David is right, like you should feel like, I don't know, some of the tension that's still there.
Well, and actually, this wasn't totally intentional, but we've had Abiathar challenge David and be right a couple of times, like a couple episodes in a row leading into this one. And so we'll be on the side of Abiathar almost, like, and he's our point of view character too. So like we'll almost be expecting Abiathar to be in the right in that conversation or that argument with David. Also, just one point of clarity on the outline, because I mentioned like David convincing them. You're right. I don't think that we want David to like convince Jehoiada and Abiathar to like completely abandon their outlook. I think he's just going to convince them of the bare point that like we're not going to do this right now.
Well, or even if he doesn't convince them, they're not going to force David to do it.
Yeah.
Like someone may, like I could see Jehoiada basically, like David's not in his good graces at the end of this episode, especially because when he sees his son, it's like he's got these twin feelings of like of love and how much he misses his son, and like maybe even burning anger in the moment at David, who allowed
I'm thinking
their separation to continue when I'm
thinking episode 6 is going to start with a lot of emotions for Jehoiada and Abiathar, and
all of his people too, because they're all thinking this is an opportunity that's going to waste.
Yep. So I definitely think that David doesn't like win them over to his perspective. He just like, it may just be as simple as like, you're gonna have to come through me, like if you're gonna like try to take this into your own hands. Like
well, that's how you could do the cold open where we have the David and Saul when they were younger and better days. That would fit a lot better there, I think. Where you see his point of view of why it's got to be different than what they think it is.
I definitely, like at some point in the episode, want that David and Saul moment. So I may just have to, depending on if I ever get around to, going and doing a more in-depth outline or script for the episode, it will probably just be kind of tinkering around and seeing like what fits best where and stuff. But like, does this feel like a good Hinge episode for like we're really kind of bringing some of those conflicts to a head, exposing perspectives, and then kind of launching into the second half of the season. Abiathar and Jehoiada, their relationship with David's really going to shift after this episode. And even like, it'll be interesting also following up in the camp of Saul. Like, think about like leaving from this moment, like Saul's army, like walking away after they just saw like their king, like, they saw David like say what he said to Saul, and Saul respond by saying that he knows that God is surely going to make David king. Like, there's definitely going to be like a lot of fallout from the episode to be exploring. And
cool. This is like a cool. I'm just struck by like Bible adaptation is not just like copy and paste the biblical text into like a script. Like there's so many cool, if you feel the kind of freedom to do this, like we're kind of doing, and as you've, especially you, Kevin, you've done like, basically you did this, like you made this, it's just really cool. Like I love the idea of like a little camp, like turning that cave scene into like a little campfire scene. And that's an appropriate time to like be telling stories, and even just where this episode, like where they start, like it's, I don't know. Anyways, and then like saying like, oh, this might actually be a good point to like draw in the story of David and Goliath, and like that fits with the, with some of the themes, or things we want to trace out with different characters in this particular episode. Like it's just such a rich, I don't know, experience or like exercise, I guess. Anyways, that's just something I'm struck by with, not just this episode, but like as we're wrapping up here, like this is so cool, like how things are, I don't know, how they're shaping up.
I mean, the way I keep on talking about it is like, I want to see this show. I would love to see this in reality. That's how, I mean, it's like not even being involved in it. This is a show I would love, I think. This is Game of Thrones of the Bible.
Yeah. If anyone's watching, if you have any connections, let us know. Yeah. But I feel like as we've done it, like it's really kind of spoken to that premise that we had going in, that, doing biblical adaptation, it's not just like a fun, like creative exercise, but it really does. It gets you into the biblical story in it like a unique way. And it can just like unlock a lot of intricacies and richness. I'm really grateful to you guys for journeying with me through past few months. Looking forward to continuing on for the next few episodes. Any other final thoughts before we head out?
That's good.
Cool. Well, thanks guys for anyone who's joined us. Got a few viewers. Feel free, this we're in a stage where I am definitely doing a lot more kind of presentation. But if you have suggestions and you're watching this either live or afterward, please leave comments. We'd love to try to incorporate ideas that you have or answer questions that you have about what we're doing, and have this be more of a communal thing. But thanks everybody for listening to the Bible verse discussion. If you have been watching this for the first time, do all the like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, so that more people can find it. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening. Godspeed.